So, in the next section, we will explore the practices and actions that we can take to create a more sustainable denim market. The panel discussion will cover the topic sustainable finance and regulations. The panelists are going to share with us the benefits and better ways to make sustainability possible in apparel and textile from a financial and practical point of view. So without further ado, may I now invite the moderator of this section, Angus Tsang, Research and Investment from the Mills Fabrica. Let's welcome Angus. Hi, Angus. And let's also welcome our panelists to come onto the stage. They are Carrie Ng, Head of Sustainable Finance from HSBC. Let's welcome Carrie. And we also have Kyle Chung, Senior Sustainability Manager from Crystal Group, who is joining us through Zoom today. And we will see him in a moment on the screen. Okay, and now pass the stage to Angus. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Angus, and I'm from the Investment and Research team of the Mills Fabrica. So today I'm happy to have Carrie from HSBC and also Kyle from Crystal Group to join me to talk about a very important topic nowadays, which is sustainable finance and regulations. Because we know that right now sustainability has evolved from a nice-to-have conversation to an industry emergency for the manufacturing and fashion industry. To begin with, may I have Carrie and Kyle to introduce themselves first. Carrie, please.
Thank you, Angus. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie. I'm a Head of Sustainable Finance for Hong Kong HSBC Commercial Banking. In our business, we support businesses of various sizes, all the way from startups to the largest state-owned enterprises in the value chain to help companies consider a few things around ESG. First is around sustainability practices and sustainable activities. The second is around target setting, around achieving net zero by whatever date the company wants to achieve net zero, and also the transition path to such. And also thirdly, around disclosure and the reporting of all their efforts and understanding their impact on the environment, and also conversely, the related climate risk on their own financial performance. So very glad to be here today to share some of what we're seeing in the textile and garments industry today. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. And Kyle, please.
Hello, Angus. Hello, Carrie. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is Kyle from Crystal International, and currently I'm responsible for the environmental program and the sustainability communications, for example, ESG reporting of Crystal International. So being a leading apparel manufacturer, Crystal has diversified product categories into 5 segments, namely lifestyle wear, intimate, denim, sweater, and sportswear. So now we are operating a multi-country manufacturing platform with over 20 factories spanning 5 countries, including Vietnam, China, Cambodia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. And of course, at Crystal, we maintain a very keen focus on sustainability. And we started our journey in 2007 and was ranked at 17th place in the Fortune Business Magazine of the Change the World list in 2017, recognizing our commitment and strategies against the climate change, environmental protection, as well as our employee caring program. So to combat climate change, in this year, we step up our actions and commitment by committing to net zero emissions by 2050, and I'm happy to share more what we are doing right now in the coming session, in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. My first question would like to ask Carrie and Kyle, what are some of the regulations around the world that you see that you believe might change the face of our manufacturing and fashion industry, and what should we be really aware of?
Sure. Perhaps I can give a perspective more from a financing angle. So, two areas. First is around requirements on ESG disclosure. So, if we look at Hong Kong as an example, by 2025, all listed companies will have to report against TCFD. And I can see that there are similar voluntary programs or mandatory programs around the world as well. So, depending on where businesses operate, there may be mandatory requirements to start reporting against ESG or climate risk. So this very much would drive companies to start thinking, measuring, and also reporting about various ESG metrics. The second factor that we see a lot is around the demand from buyers. So a lot of businesses that we work with, they're typically suppliers to big fashion retailers, etc. And a lot of the buyers are starting to screen vendors or evaluate their vendors based on various metrics, including such of ESG. So as an example, if you want to be onboarded as a vendor to some multinational retail fashion retailers, then you will have to meet certain criteria from an ESG perspective before you will be considered for becoming a part of the vendor. And on an annual basis, a lot of buyers start scoring their suppliers. And for suppliers who obtain lower scores, there may be a chance that they will be sort of kicked out of that supply chain. So the requirements on disclosure as well as the demand pool from buyers is what we see. Thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of the demand from buyers and suppliers, I think perhaps Kyle can give us more color on that from the manufacturing standpoint. Kyle, what are some of the regulations that you see that you believe are very important for the future of manufacturing and fashion?
Yes. First of all, thank you for Carrie sharing about the requirements to be launched in 2025 regarding the mandatory TCFD disclosure. So first, I would like to add something on this point first. With regard to these requirements, actually, we commissioned a consultancy firm to conduct a preliminary climate-related risk analysis last year to explore the potential range of climate change implications. And the identified risks have been incorporated into our strategy planning as well as the group risk management system, which would be reviewed biannually to ensure the necessary actions are identified and appropriate controls are in place. And regarding Angus' question just now, with the global commitment made, we speculate more and more policies and regulations will be promulgated so as to drive the low carbon transition. And according to an online tracker, so far, I think over 130 countries or jurisdictions have made a carbon neutral pledge. Taking one of our operating countries, Vietnam, as an example, per their commitment to net zero 2050, the Vietnam government launched a decree this year, January, which is to stipulate the reporting of carbon emissions of large emitting companies of if in case their emissions are larger than 3,000 tons a year. And this law also requires the companies to set a carbon reduction plan and for paving way for emission trading markets in Vietnam. And to this degree, some of our factories are falling into their criteria and has to prepare for the submission of the reduction plan towards 2030. And corresponding progress report to be submitted to the authorities. And because Vietnam government is planning, as I mentioned, is planning to launch their carbon trading market. The pilot in 2025 and officially launch the market in 2028. So in response to these growing regulatory requirements, manufacturers should take a proactive approach to develop a robust system for their carbon emission accounting, building inventory for tracking, as well as we all know that measurement is very important first step for management. And yeah, I'll share more later in these sessions. And in addition to the law to be that many of our operating countries are planning, and I also foresee that they are also planning some cap and trade market in our production countries. So I think we should be keep abreast of the latest development of this kind of policies and regulations also. Thank you, Angus.
Thanks, Kyle, for sharing with us your first-hand observations. And we all know that regulations play a very important role in giving us a top-down influence to drive changes. But apart from regulations, what are some of the other drivers that you see that can help with and facilitate sustainable finance at the moment?
Sure. I think apart from the regulations or disclosure requirements or the demand by buyers, another trend that we see is around the competitiveness. As a lot of our companies, when they see some of their peers starting to engage in sustainable activities or started doing a marketing around such, they would want to maintain competitive. We have conducted quite a number of surveys among businesses and also on the consumer market. And we have seen evidence whereby the end buyers would actually be prepared to pay a premium for products that is either produced or sourced or distributed in a more sustainable manner. So I see more and more companies realizing that it is not only a regulatory requirement, but to a certain extent, achieving competitiveness in the market.
And Kyle, what would you say are some of the other drivers apart from regulations?
I would like to continue the buyer's demand that Carrie just manufacturer perspective, because I think not just Crystal, actually, to most of the manufacturers and suppliers, this is the challenge that we are coming across. So I think as of September this year, I just checked the Science-Based Target Initiative yesterday. So far, 1,400 companies have committed and got a validated net zero goal with the interim targets by the Science-Based Target Initiative, in which over 110 of them are from fashion industries, and most of them are from our brand customers. So it signifies that most of our brand customers have made their commitment, and they are planning something, planning their strategy, planning their agenda to reduce not just the emissions from their operations, but also their supply chain. Having said that, it's quite often that different customers have their own climate strategies and pace. Though we are having the same ultimate goal, somehow it might induce challenges for suppliers to adapt to different pace and different strategies. And at Crystal, we value the partnership with all brand customers who share a common goal. We are keeping a close liaison with our customers, embodying a very important concept, eco-partnership. We discussed and we shared the mutual needs, explore and roll out pragmatic and effective programs to support the decarbonization progress and targets achievement of both sides. This because we understand that neither buyers nor suppliers alone can achieve this challenging climate goal without collaboration. Through joining different industry coalitions, for instance, at Crystal, we cited the United Nations Fashion Industry Climate Charter and pool efforts with over 170 signatories. We also joined the steering committee and various working groups across different industry coalitions and initiatives. So as to accelerate the industry decarbonization and enhance the policy and stakeholder engagement. So for my 2 cents, I encourage our industry peers to step up their actions and open a mutual and healthy dialogue with their customers so as to explore optimized way out and share the technical know-how to transition to a low-carbon future collaboratively.
Thanks, Kyle. Partnerships are definitely one of the great drivers behind. And if we talk about from a banking perspective, which is the fundamental engine to drive all the business activities in our economy, Carrie, I would like to know what would you say about the differences between applying for right now some green financing products versus some of the traditional loan products in the market? What kind of metrics would you look at when you are picking the candidates?
Sure, thank you. So perhaps I can give a bit of an overview on what kind of sustainable finance lending products currently are in the market that is commonly used. So in general, there are 2 types of sustainable financing. The first type is called use of proceeds. So this type of lending, the proceeds that a borrower has obtained, it has to be used against certain restricted projects. The second type is what we call sustainability linked. So from a sustainability linked perspective, the proceeds will not have restricted usage. It can be for general corporate purposes, for working capital purposes. But what we will do is to agree a set of ESG related key performance indicators or KPIs with the companies, and we'll be monitoring their performance against such KPIs throughout the tenure of the loan. So if I go into a bit more details, from a use of proceeds perspective, the most common product that we see in the market now is called green loan. So as you can imagine, it is the use of proceeds that is restricted to the use of green projects. And what defines a green project? There are international principles guiding what is or is not a green project. And if I use an example of, say, a textile manufacturer, if the manufacturer sources, say, organic cotton, sustainable yarn, etc., that is being certified by bodies such as the GRS, etc., then that is a green project. So moving on to the manufacturing side, if you then, say, install solar panels on rooftop of your manufacturing plant such that part of your energy supply comes from renewable energy, so this renewable project is a green project. There will be machineries involved in the manufacturing process, and for companies who then upgrade or purchase a new, more energy efficient machinery, let's say if the energy efficiency can be improved 15, 20% or more, again, this is a green project. There will be processes in terms of water and waste, and if a company seeks to improve these processes to reduce water consumption, reduce the waste, or improve the recycling rate of the waste generated, or avoiding incineration of such of the waste, again, these are considered as green projects. So after you've made the garment, you're going to distribute it. If you then, say, change your current fleet to a new energy vehicle, again, that is a green project. So currently there are 11 categories of green projects according to the green loan principles, which is the overarching international principles guiding such green loans. And hopefully my example just now gives you a little bit of an idea of what classifies as a green project. So for a green loan, apart from the proceeds having to be used upon green projects, the borrower also have to take note of a few things. So first of all is the traceability of the cash. So you have to be able to trace and understand where these proceeds is allocated to. So if you, let's say, borrow 100 million Hong Kong dollars, where is it spent? What kind of green projects are these funds allocated to? As well as what is the environmental impact of such? So things like how much carbon emission have you reduced, how much water consumption have you reduced, etc. And there is a requirement of regular reporting from a green loan perspective. The second type that I mentioned around sustainability-linked loan, the mechanism is slightly different. As I mentioned, the proceeds doesn't have to be restricted for a certain usage. And what we will do is to agree a set of KPIs with companies. And typically, we will agree, say, between 3 to 5 KPIs. And for every year, we will agree targets with the company. So it can be along E, S, or G. So I'll give an example again. From an environment perspective, we may look at the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So on a year-to-year basis, reduction either on an absolute level or reduction in an intensity level. And by intensity, I mean the greenhouse gas emissions, say by dollar revenue or by per kg of product produced, etc. So various ways of measuring the intensity. We can also measure things like water consumption, again on an absolute or intensity level. We can also look at things like the percentage of sustainable sourcing. So having an increased percentage or proportion of the raw materials that you sourced having being certified by certain sustainable or green certificates. Moving to social. So what we see typically in manufacturing would be, for example, around the safety and the healthcare of workers, the incident rates. Again, reducing or maintaining if you're already at a very good level. From a training perspective, it will be increasing in the training hours. There are also some companies who may have special programs. So for example, projects creating employment for local population, creating employment for local youth or the underrepresented, etc. So we can also set a target around increasing the proportion of your workforce coming from these groups. So the last is around governance. What we see a lot is around diversity. So looking at, say, senior management or board level, what proportion of the representatives are, say, female, what is the age or ethnic minority distribution. There are also, we've seen cases whereby some of the companies, they may obtain ISO certificates for some of their, let's say, environment management system, etc. So by year, looking across, for example, their production line or their brands or however they organize their organization, the proportion of their operations or systems obtaining such standards. So quite broad. As I mentioned, typically 3 to 5 of such KPIs, and depending on whether the company managed to meet the annual targets, there will be adjustments to the interest margins. So let's say, for example, I've set the 3 KPIs with a company, and the company only meets one of the 3 KPIs, and no change in the interest margins. If they meet 2 out of 3, there'll be the margins will be lowered. If you meet 3 out of 3, even lower margin. And then conversely, if you don't meet any of such KPIs, then there may be a penalty involved. And the way that we agree these KPIs with the companies, typically we look at a few things. So first, we look at the overall alignment with the core ESG strategy of the group. We want to make sure that these KPIs are in line with what the company wants to achieve in the long run. We also look at the materiality. So let's say if you're a manufacturer, from a social perspective, I mentioned probably around an incident and healthcare and the safety of workers. Whereas if you're working, or if a company is a bank, they probably will look at things like cybersecurity, the sales practices. It's very different ESG matters that we look at for different companies. And the third is around the ambitiousness. So we talked about setting targets. At a minimum, that the targets should be better than what you would have achieved under a business as usual scenario. So we really want to promote and motivate companies to do more than what they would normally do from a sustainability perspective through the interest adjustments. We would look at a company's historic performance on these metrics. We would look at peer comparison, and depending on the metric, we may also look at sort of international pathway or standards. Just now, Kyle mentioned science-based targets, so this is very much a very advanced target that is in line with current climate science. We do not see a lot of companies, especially in Hong Kong or in China, subscribing to science-based target, but it's definitely something that we are working with companies to try to get them to that stage. And what we're seeing more common would be comparison with peers at the moment. And similar to green loans, from a sustainability-linked loan perspective, we would also require the company to monitor those targets, and it is also a mandatory requirement for those actual performance to be externally verified. So that is sort of the key difference between the sustainable finance loan, where there will be different requirements depending on whether you're looking for a use of proceeds loan or a sustainability-linked loan versus a traditional financing.
Yeah. Thanks for the detailed elaboration. I believe the traceability and the regulatory reporting are very important in helping us do the assessment and evaluation. And I would like to chat with you on the reporting part in a bit, because right now I want to immediately ask Kyle, in your shoes, how do you see the sustainable finance support that you need to help you decarbonize the supply chain? Because I know that Crystal Group has a net zero 2050 strategy.
Yes, thank you, Angus. And to this question, I think it might not be just only Crystal. And again, I would like to share more from a manufacturer perspective. So in general, in particular, smaller manufacturers, they might come across some challenges, such as the lack of resources, including manpower, technical know-how, financial resources, and pressure somehow intricate requirements from different external stakeholders. So regarding financial support that you just asked it, I trust it could be more precisely and concisely determined with a wider engagement with the buyer that I just shared earlier. So with that being said, for less experienced suppliers, they should start with structuring their strategy and action plans because at the very beginning stage, it is of vital importance to find out what they have to do and in what timeline and the amount of investment that they have to make. Actually, some industry programs, such as the IFC Patch program, Clean by Design by AII, could be considered in this regard. And I think financial support from brand customers to manufacturers to their supply chain for joining these industry programs would be very welcome. In addition, as mentioned by Carrie also, sizable energy efficiency retrofitting, such as boilers, chillers, and renewable energy, such as rooftop solar PV, are indispensable to decarbonize the supply chain, in which this kind of projects would incur a substantial amount of investment. So taking rooftop solar PV as an example, with the technology advancement today, though the ROI, the payback is getting shorter and shorter, it's still needed to take around 5 to 7 years, depending on the countries or locations. So considering the current economic environment, it's still relatively a long-term investment if invested solely by the manufacturers. So in that sense, though OPEC's operation financial models for solar PV, such as power purchase agreement and the leasing model, are quite prevailing nowadays, I guess somehow financial support might be an option for some manufacturers today for investing those kind of sizable retrofitting and renewable energy projects. So for additional information, in our industry, Apparel Impact Institute, AII, has teamed up with other industry organizations such as SAC and some leading funder. And they are raising an amount of 250 billion fashion climate fund with a view to unlocking a total of 2 billion in branded capital. According to AII's info online, projects with expected carbon reduction, or if they can demonstrate the proof, are eligible to partake this kind of fashion climate fund. For example, renewable energy pilots and feasibility study, scaling the use of preferred sustainable materials. So I think we also keep in view the development of this kind of funds in the market or in our industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And final question, and we would like to open the floor to the audience for questions. For those who haven't started their journey on climate change reporting, what would you suggest them to do better to equip themselves or prepare themselves to conduct these kinds of climate change reporting or sustainability reports for sustainable finance purpose?
Sure. I think based on some of the market research and also our engagement with clients, typically there are three things that businesses want the most. First is around the education. So understanding what does ESG actually means, what are some of the regulations that are in place, etc. Just understanding what it's all about and what can they do. The second piece is around the best practice sharing and technical support. So after understanding and becoming aware what a company can actually do in terms of implementing sustainable activities, and what does that mean from what Cal mentioned, a returns perspective, etc. And then third is around networking. So how can they access the network of, say, providers or industry peers where they can continue to learn more and obtain such services? And I think one of the best ways for companies to start is to look out for free ESG advisory or free ESG workshops. And there are plenty of such in the Hong Kong market. Just taking HSBC as an example, we do a living business program, which is a capacity building and award program for SMEs in Hong Kong. It is completely free of charge. And we will have sort of expert panels working with companies through a year-long program to allow companies to understand what is their current status from an ESG perspective, what can they do more, and what kind of technology or activities they can then invest or pursue. And at the end of the year, we would normally, typically companies would commit to implementing one or a few initiatives, and towards the end of the program, whoever wants to join the competition to showcase what they have done throughout the course of the year, the winner with sort of the most achievement will be awarded the HSBC Living Business Award. We're also launching a series of free ESG sessions starting October this year. It's called the ESG Academy. This is a joint collaboration with the International Auditor and Inspector, SGS, basically to provide free ESG educational series for companies. And if you look at perhaps not banks, but then other ESG service providers in the market, there will be some of these free sessions available as well. So that is always a good starting point. I think secondly is to start mapping out your stakeholders and then conducting survey to understand your stakeholders' view as to what they see as material ESG issues for your company. That is always a starting point. There are a million things that you can do from an ESG perspective, but what actually matters to your stakeholders? So a stakeholder survey on this is always another good starting point.
And Kyle, can we have some of your suggestions?
Yes, in my 2 cents, to prepare for sustainable finance, a company shall have a systematic approach to track and measure their impact performance, both positive or negative outcomes for people or the planet, which could be in a pretty broad range for minimizing carbon footprint or addressing some global challenges such as the UN SDGs. So to start with regard to the climate impact, I trust a robust ESG and climate data management system would be crucial. So at Crystal, our carbon emissions inventory covering all our manufacturing facilities and operations has been verified in accordance with the ISO 14064 standard, certifying the robustness and the credibility of our data collection, accounting, and management system. And going further, we are exploring and considering the application of digital technologies such as smart metering, IoT, with a view to developing an integrative approach from data collection, analytics, reporting, or even forecasting. In addition, we conducted the CDP climate disclosure annually, though the process, I can say, is very tedious. We resulted in a rating that is better than the industry average. This not just only drives our climate initiatives, tracks the corresponding progress and the effectiveness, but also it embodies transparency to our stakeholders. And as I mentioned earlier, we have conducted the climate risk analysis according to the TCFD framework. So please feel free to check it out in our latest sustainability reports. And of course, we will be very happy to receive feedback from many of you and exchange with different parties regarding this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. And we already have a question from an online audience. So the question is, Hong Kong is supposed to join RCEP in the near future, which stands for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership initiated by the 10 ASEAN countries. What do you think the impact would be on the denim trade or the fashion industry in general?
I think I can sort of probably chip in a little. I think from a financing perspective, Hong Kong has always been a very strong financial hub to facilitate trade. And if we look at sort of Asia in general, Hong Kong continues to stand out as one of the biggest import and export hub. So I think we will continue to have this competitive advantage. And from a sustainable finance perspective, if we look at the countries as well, Hong Kong is actually, if not the most liquid and the largest market from a sustainable finance perspective. And just to give you a perspective, if we look at the green, social, sustainability linked or sustainable bonds in the 2021 volumes, Hong Kong actually accounts for 2/3 of Asia's total for volumes in GSS plus bonds. And if we look at Hong Kong as a key offshore financing hub for a lot of Chinese companies, I can totally see that trends continue. And I think what we can continue to do is to share our best practices and to demonstrate to other of the economies in Asia, particularly in the ASEAN market, how to support the wider ecosystem in driving more sustainable finance and trade.
Kyle, would you like to have any add-on to this one?
I trust Carrie has covered most of some important insight to this joining, but from my perspective, I think joining the outside would be a very important step for Denim trade, because we have to be familiar not just the manufacturing environment and the trading system of the markets, but in terms of sustainability, we have been also aware of any possible future regulations. Because from my understanding, some of the countries now they are planning some product label. For example, in France, they are going to launch their product label scheme to avoid any greenwashing in the market, and it requests all the products that are going into their market have to be verified in case they would like to change their product to be carbon neutral. So some countries are planning for this, and I'm not sure whether maybe in the future in the Asian countries or the other jurisdictions that something might be also coming out in the future. So we have to get prepared for this also.
Thanks, Kyle. And I see the gentleman over there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. This question is for Carrie from HSBC. You explained a little bit about the financing products with use of proceeds and sustainability-linked loans. And we heard from Kyle about a program from AII, the Apparel Impact Institute. So I'm curious to know, there's a potential investee, a factory, who maybe all of these organizations are competing for. HSBC wants to give them sustainable linked loan, BNP Paribas wants to give, AII wants to give, and Good Fashion Fund also wants to give. And today, many of these organizations, or all of these organizations, they carry on an environmental and social due diligence prior to disbursement. And the depth of this due diligence varies across all of these organizations. Have you come across any plan to perhaps harmonize and standardize these due diligence requirements so a potential investee knows what information they should provide to y'all who have the funds, and a potential investee knows how on an annual basis that metrics, impact metrics will be captured? Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Harmonization is a very key topic in the sustainability world, not only from a due diligence perspective, but from a disclosure perspective, various taxonomies, various definitions. While HSBC and I believe a lot of the other financiers or organizations would align themselves to international principles, a lot of these organizations, including ourselves, we sit on committee and working groups and advisory boards to some of these standard setting or principle setting bodies. So from a sustainable finance perspective, as an example, we sit on the Asia Pacific Loan Markets Association, basically who writes and publishes the guidance for sustainability-linked loans and green loans principles. And we are actively contributing into sort of the direction of travel and of how sustainable finance should evolve. As I mentioned earlier, harmonization is key. What we're seeing, for example, in terms of disclosure, currently there are various standards, and now there's an initiative sort of brought on by the accounting arena, the ISSB, who's going to actually consolidate and harmonize a number of standards that is currently used in the market. And if we look at a geography perspective, EU, as an example, has their taxonomy. China, they have their own sort of green loan rule books and what classifies as a green project, etc. And now we have an EU-China common ground taxonomy. So again, we are definitely seeing a trend of harmonization. In my view, it will take time because as we continue to consolidate and harmonize, there will be new standards popping up every day. We call it the alphabet soup in the sustainable finance world. So we will continue to use our influence and also share our insights and some of the pain points that you mentioned that are being faced not only by companies, but by ourselves as well, sometimes working with such companies to continue to drive harmonization.
Thank you, Carrie. And do we have any more questions from the audience? Yes.
So thank you both for the sharing. So I have a question maybe for Carrie. And I understand that when granting the sustainability-linked loans to the corporates, you have to vet through a lot of documents to make sure that the companies have met the requirements. So, but afterwards, how can you make sure that they're really working towards the KPIs set, or how would the team give the companies some sort of advice if they're not on the right track to make sure that both parties are really making progress on the sustainability side? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So on an annual basis, we will require the borrower to report against the target. So they would share with us their actual performance against their targets. So that gives us a mechanism throughout our relationship with the borrower to understand where they are. And I think it's very key to point out that while we set targets, we do not want to penalize companies for not meeting these targets because these are supposed to be ambitious targets. We want to encourage companies. And even if companies do not meet such requirements, we don't want them to feel discouraged or that they won't want to sign up for a sustainability-linked loan because the targets are too ambitious. So I think it is a very collaborative approach. The intention is trying to motivate to have ambitious targets and to meet with them. And in terms of agreeing such targets and the KPIs with the companies, we typically go into quite in-depth discussions. So when a company talks to us about, so we want to set these targets, there will be a conversation around, okay, if let's say 5% of reduction is your target for greenhouse gas, what exactly are you doing to help you achieve this 5%? And then we will make a bit of a judgment based on our understanding of the company, of their peers, whether that is ambitious or not, or if we are seeing there can be more that a company can be doing. So there is definitely this process. I think that the role that the banks play is very important, and oftentimes we collaborate with beyond banking service providers. I mean, after all, while we can share directionally with companies what we're seeing in the market and what we see in principles and in industries, if a company comes to us and ask very technical questions around, I want to reduce my water consumption, like what can I do? Apart from quite generic practice of what we see, we can't really give that advice, and I don't think it is our position to do so. Hence, we would work very closely with some of these ESG advisory firms in the market to then bring in that technical expertise to our clients. And I think that is a very key area for sustainable finance as well, because it is a very ecosystem and collaborative approach, requiring parties who bring in different expertise and different skill sets to the party to help companies and geographies in general to achieve net zero.
Yes, Cynthia.
So thank you so much for your sharing. It's very insightful. And actually, a lot of companies and organizations that we speak to, I guess sustainability and ESG is it's somewhat agreeable that is a very important thing going forward. Now, speaking of which, I know that Carrie, you mentioned that there's the ESG Academy that's free, which is amazing, and Carl, with a lot of the initiatives that you have at Crystal, that's also really, really amazing. Though, what is your insight and kind of guidance to SMEs? Because as we know, sustainability tracking of monitoring and reporting could be a very costly exercise. What's your advice on that? That's my first question. And second, less from a risk management perspective, but more from an opportunity perspective. If the SME or the smaller companies or medium-sized companies are not tracking their ESG metrics, what are they missing out?
Perhaps I can start a little. We work with SMEs a lot, and you're absolutely right. A lot of times they lack the capability or the resources to track, and oftentimes not sure where to start. I think apart from the stakeholder survey that I mentioned about, and also the free ESG training, another area that is very important is talk to your buyers. They are evaluating you. Find out what exactly are they measuring you against. This will inform you what are the good metrics for you to start measuring. There are frameworks. For example, Carl mentioned CDP, they actually do have an SME reporting framework, which is more streamlined. Although for some of the companies that have gone through that process is still quite tedious, but there are sort of SME tailored. There are also free carbon calculators available in the market, so that is always a good starting point. If you operate in Hong Kong, the electricity companies, they actually provide free energy audit service. They go to your facilities, they look at your infrastructure, and then they will give you a very, very detailed report as to how you can improve your energy efficiency. What is the returns on investment? What exactly can you do? They even provide subsidy as well. So these are some great resources to start with. The Hong Kong government, they also have certificate schemes. So they have waste-wise, energy-wise. Again, great starting point if you want to obtain a free certificate. And going through that process also informs an SME what to look at and give them a starting point to start measuring.
And from my side, I would like to echo what Carrie mentioned and regarding the engagement with the buyers, because talking about carbon emissions, we all know that our emissions from our operations are their Scope 3 emissions, which also fall into their carbon reduction targets. So for years, we have observed that a not very healthy phenomenon in our industry, that sustainability requirements are mostly driven by the buyers, and they point into the suppliers to do this and to do that. But we all know that we are on the same boat, right, along the decarbonization journey. So as I suggested, I would like to reiterate the engagement in a wider context between brands and manufacturers. And this kind of bilateral communications can facilitate a mutual understanding of the specific difficulties and needs, instead of just imposing something like one-size-fits-all requirements. So this will be a more healthier approach, which embodies the equal partnership, given that buyers and suppliers share a common goal. And maybe we can talk with the buyers on what kind of support they will need. We can openly discuss with them, which I think most of our buyers are very welcome on. That's because from what I have observed, that some of our customers are still structuring the best way to go to decarbonize their climate change, to decarbonize their supply chain. So I think this kind of open dialogue would be very welcome to the buyers also.
We have one follow-up question.
Hearing to you, Carrie, about the due diligence, engagement, monitoring, and hearing from Kyle, it seems to be a lot of work linked to sustainability-linked finance. So I'm curious, when HSBC as a financier is going to give 50 basis point, let's say, discount to the investee once they meet the link and you have all of that investment of hours and time, is it profitable for a bank like HSBC? Or do you see all of this as an investment because maybe 10 years from now, every loan of HSBC will be either green loan or sustainability linked loan, and that's why you take it as cost?
Sure, yes. Yes, that is a great question. So currently, we strongly believe that more sustainable companies would be winners in future. And from a bank's perspective, we ourselves are also very dedicated to sustainability as an agenda. We wanted to achieve net zero from our operations by 2030, and from a finance emissions perspective, net zero by 2050. So we're a very committed organization to sustainability. And while we understand there may be cost to the bank in this journey, we are willing to work collectively with the wider sort of ecosystem to really promote and drive sustainability. There is a hard deadline, unfortunately, when it comes to carbon emissions. If we breach that carbon quota, climate change would reach the point of no return. So it is a very key issue impacting livelihoods of people. And our role very much here is to help economies prosper. And if we can't even stop climate change, then how can the economies prosper? Apart from financial support from the private sector, actually the Hong Kong government, as an example, they have a grant scheme for sustainable finance products where they provide grant to support issuance cost for bonds, and also some of these external review costs that I mentioned around measuring metrics, doing the annual verification, etc. So there is also support from the government. There is also various grant schemes by various organizations and the government around supporting green projects. And typically, if a company engage in some of the ESG consultants or advisory firms, they would support companies as well to apply for different grants to help make up for the capital investment that is required. So hopefully, that provides you with a view.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of your participation today. And I believe today is a very good starting point for us, people who are new to sustainable finance or who are already familiar with this topic. We all learn more about this topic today. And I believe that it takes all parties' efforts to work together towards this sustainable finance in the future, including manufacturers and also banks and also everyone of us. Thank you for our audience, great questions, and also again for Carrie and Kyle, your sharing with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give them another round of applause. And thank you, Kyle, for joining us today. And thank you, the group, for the very fruitful discussion, and Carrie for going into the detail of sustainability-linked and proceeds loans. And thank you so much. And also, we'd like to let you know that there are always readily available free resources so that you can always start ESG plans. Thank you so much. Please be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for lunch after a pretty information-packed morning section. The conference will start again at 2 p.m., but feel free to come back half an hour earlier at 1:30 to check out the showcase booths at the back of the room. And always remember to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. Follow our social media page as we'll be posting event highlights. So if you don't want to miss out, follow us there. And the next section at 2 p.m. is a keynote presentation given by WGSN. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you around.